Our story begins in 1909, back when the old courthouse was brand new. Work had just been completed on the grand facade, but inside a different kind of transformation was taking place. Shadowy black and white images moved and danced on a sheet hung on the wall. You see, a carnival had come to town, but when they couldn't pay their bills, they just up and moved on, leaving behind a primitive motion picture projector. And it was through the lens of this device that Hollywood came to Asheboro. When Asheboro first saw moving pictures over 100 years ago, there was a young man in the audience at those courthouse showings. His name was Francis White, and he was entranced by what he saw. He vowed one day to have a movie projector of his own. Over 2 decades, a world war, and the roaring 20s would come and go before his dream became reality. In 1929, local businessman Kirby Cox broke ground on an elegant new movie theater, Asheboro's first dedicated talking picture house on the west end of Sunset Avenue. Cox leased the property to none other than that wide-eyed entrepreneur, Francis White, who together with Dick Stone would manage the Sunset for the next 50 years. By March 6, 1930, the Sunset Theater was ready for its grand opening with a showing of The Big Party. It should have been a golden time for Asheboro and for the nation, but dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. Less than 6 months before the Sunset opened, the Dow Jones average had crashed. Black Tuesday, October 29, 1929, harbinger of the Great Depression. As the entertainment newspaper Variety put it, Wall Street lays an egg. The previous half-century had seen Asheboro grow from being a village to being a town, as its population surpassed 5,000 souls in the 1930 census. But the onslaught of the economic downhill slide cast a pall over everything: business, growth, and the prospects for the future. The bright spot frequently could be found on the screen at the Sunset, which saw action-packed adventures play out in the Saturday afternoon serials: Tom Mix, The Lone Ranger, Flash Gordon.
And I seem to find the happiness I seek when we're out together dancing cheek to cheek.
For about 35 cents, the townspeople of Asheboro could escape the harsh realities of the Depression, getting lost in the glamour of Hollywood. Even as the Depression deepened, Asheboro was laying the foundation for recovery. In addition to the sparkling new theater on Sunset Avenue, Asheboro welcomed the big-town Belk department store in 1930. In 1932, Randolph Hospital opened. In 1935, the county's first golf course, built with WPA funds, teed off on Country Club Drive. And throughout the decade, new factories and businesses opened. And through it all, the Sunset Theater provided laughter, thrills, and adventure.
You know, I'd be lost without a telephone. Hey, don't go away. I want to talk to you.
As the 1930s drew to a close, the hardship of the Great Depression began to fade. Asheboro and the entire nation felt the stirrings of optimism. The Sunset celebrated with a glittering constellation of stars.
Did I upset your plans? You've come to Nottingham once too often.
The summer of 1939 in North Carolina was predictably hot and more than usually wet. Asheboro flocked to the Sunset to enjoy the cool air conditioning and take in newsreels before settling in to watch the latest blockbuster movie from one of Hollywood's best years ever. Dorothy, Toto, and her friends set off down the yellow brick road to find the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Because of the wonderful things he does. We're off to see.
And, of course, the sweeping epic of ill-fated lovers Rhett and Scarlet, set against the ravages of the war-torn South, Gone with the Wind.
Red! You go. Where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
But as summer gave way to fall, the images on the newsreels grew more ominous. Once again, the gathering storm mounted over Europe. In September, Germany invaded Poland, plunging the continent into bloody conflict for the second time in the century. Again, the screen of the Sunset Theater provided a window on a very different world for the town folks of Asheboro. The news of the war gave way to the fantasies of film, and for a while, the realities outside were forgotten. Walt Disney shaped magical worlds and elevated animation to an art. Hard-boiled private eyes turned out to be good guys.
We were talking about a lot more money than this. There are more of us to be taken care of now. Well, that may be, but I've got the fork.
And truth and justice mattered after all.
Time for that schoolgirl act with both of us sitting under the gallows.
Someday over the rainbow.
And romance always won out in the end.
Now, easy, old man. She's not hurt?
No.
Not wounded, sir, but dead.
But the pause in America's story came abruptly to an end, December 7th, 1941. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor quickly ushered the United States from the sidelines to center stage in the war. In Asheboro, young men enlisted in waves, while young women took their places on the factory floor. Nearly everyone in town played a part. But for the motion picture industry and the Sunset Theater, providing entertainment and maintaining morale was the most important thing during these perilous times. The screen was filled with light-hearted romantic comedies.
He makes the company jump when he plays reveille. He's the boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company B.
Wait a minute. Huh? Where's Herbie?
How did you get up in that tree?
How did I get up in a tree? I sat on it when it was an acorn.
And heroic storylines that lionize the American fighting spirit.
Get her closer.
If I get any closer to that bridge, we'll have to pay a toll charge.
In the darkest days of 1942, the conflict was the setting for one of the most enduring films of all time.
Those I'm no good at being noble, but it doesn't take much to see that the problems of three little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world. Someday you'll understand that. Now. He's looking at you, kid. I bet you still owe me 10,000 francs.
And that 10,000 francs should pay our expenses.
Our expenses? Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
After Louis and Rick leave Casablanca, the American Navy arrived. The movie premiered just a few weeks after the invasion of North Africa. Still, 3 long, brutal years of war lay ahead, with too many of Asheboro's best away on the front lines. As the war years wore on, the newsreels began to sound a more hopeful note. It was evident the Allies were on the march. Victory in Europe was followed in a matter of weeks by the surrender of Japan's imperial forces. A fresh sense of hope and confidence swept over the nation, a feeling that we could take on the big boys and lick them at their own game. It was a feeling reflected in movies like that perennial holiday favorite, It's a Wonderful Life.
A very dear friend of mine.
That's right. That's right.
Victory did not translate directly into prosperity, however, and Americans were hungry for a change. The presidential race of 1948 was one of the closest on record. Newspaper headlines confidently proclaimed Thomas Dewey the winner, but wartime President Harry Truman eked out a narrow victory. The post-war years were a mixture of optimism and uncertainty, as the unity and common purpose of the war effort began to unravel. Finally, in 1950, on the Korean Peninsula, the first clash between Iron Curtain countries and the West flared up. But though the conflict in Korea was bloody and has not been resolved even to this day, it was not the all-absorbing war effort that the world wars had been. Back home in Asheboro, shiny new Fords and Chevys were being delivered to dealerships, and Sunset Avenue was alive with activity virtually every night of the week. A Saturday night date would probably include taking in a blockbuster Hollywood musical at the theater.
A kiss on the hand may be quite continental, but diamonds are a girl's best friend. A kiss may be grand, but it won't pay the...
During these years, the silver screen at the Sunset was literally alive with such a variety of classic entertainment, from the charming and romantic
This is the night, it's a beautiful night, and we call it a bella notte.
You!
Oh, don't sing about me. You know I'm nervous. I could have spilled everything all...
to the comic,
Okay.
to the chilling.
Good evening. I'm Ronald Reagan speaking for General Electric. Tonight,
The parade of stars included one who came to Asheboro in person. Ronald Reagan was the host of the GE Theater on television and toured the country to promote the show and GE products.
I've heard about you.
What have you heard, Shane?
I've heard that you're a low-down Yankee liar.
Established Hollywood stars would win the West over and over again.
One threw a party in the county jail. The prison band was there, they began to wail. The band was jumping and the jump began to swing. You should have heard the knocked out jailbird sing that rock.
And newcomers would shake things up in a whole different way.
Everybody in the whole cell block was dancing to the jailhouse rock.
As the 1950s faded into the 1960s, the motion picture industry felt the competition from television grow more acute. In response, studio epics became more grandiose than ever, literally filling the screen with action, mystery, exotic locales, and above all, star power.
Well, if we ever get out of this alive, let's go back to New York on the train together. All right?
Yet sometimes it was the simple stories, told beautifully, that touched us most and made us see those better angels of our nature.
With all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view.
Sir?
In Asheboro and throughout the South, the story of Atticus Finch was not just fiction. African Americans were in the midst of a long struggle for equality.
Same every night.
Internationally, it was October of 1962 when the long-simmering antagonism between the United States and the Soviet Union once again reached a flashpoint. As America watched breathlessly, John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev took the world to the brink of nuclear war, only to back away when the stakes got too high. The intrigue of the Cuban Missile Crisis brought to light the shadowy art of espionage, just as a new kind of spy, one with great gadgets and impeccable timing, burst on the scene.
I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
The Second World War, less than 20 years past, continued to be a huge box office draw, especially when the stories were true and paired with a long list of Hollywood's finest. Escape was still a big part of what picture houses like the Sunset offered. But for the nation, reality and tragedy was just around the corner in Dallas on November 22, 1963. An assassin cut down President John F. Kennedy as his motorcade made its way through Dealey Plaza. As the world watched and mourned, no one realized what a turning point this was in our history. The Kennedy assassination seemed to usher in a new era of distrust and discontent. Movies reflected this unsettled new climate, changes in society, and even questions about good and evil and the nature of humankind were part of the fare at the Sunset. Even the good guys couldn't be trusted anymore. They didn't even wear white hats.
You're gonna get used to wearing them chains after a while, Luke. But they're gonna remind you of what I've been saying. For your own good.
Wish you'd stop being so good to me, Captain.
Don't you ever talk that way to me. Never! Never! What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Failure to communicate might have described the whole 1960s, an era of contrasts. In faraway San Francisco, the summer of 1967 turned into the summer of love. Asheboro continued to thrive, with new businesses and industries moving to town. At the same time, the core of the city began slowly to dwindle. Still, the Sunset could always be counted on for wholesome family entertainment. That was its heritage and its reputation.
For a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, the medicine go down, the medicine go down. Just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down in a most delightful way.
In 1968, Hollywood came to Asheboro for real, as stars Robert Walker Jr., Diane Varsi, and producer-actor-writer Dick Clark set up shop in North Carolina to film Killers 3. The movie's premiere screenings at the Sunset were the biggest showbiz deals for Asheboro since Ronald Reagan came to town. The misbegotten tale of moonshiners and murder featured songs by Merle Haggard, who also appeared in the film as the sheriff. Killers 3 hasn't exactly earned a place as an enduring icon of American filmmaking, but movies like these delved into the darker side of the human psyche. The result opened the door for Hollywood studios to discover the counterculture and a new era in filmmaking. By the end of the decade, American society had undergone an enormous shift. What had begun as an era of optimism and conformity had spun into the age of Aquarius. Turn on, tune in, drop out. It culminated in August of 1969 at Max Yasgur's dairy farm near the upstate New York village of Woodstock. But the days of peace and music were short-lived, and as the nation turned to the 1970s, what moviegoers wanted more than anything else was a return to the assurance of an earlier time.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Put it right, join me home. Have some fun.
But alas, for Sunset Avenue and the Sunset Theater, the glory days were past. After nearly 40 years as downtown Asheboro's gathering place, the Sunset ended its reign as a premier movie house. For a while during the 70s, the theater changed its name to The Flick and continued to bring big screen action to Asheboro.
I know what you're thinking. Did he fire 6 shots or only 5? Well, to tell you the truth, in all this excitement, I've kind of lost track myself. But being this is a 44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and would blow your head clean off, you've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
The best of Hollywood celebrated heroes who made us feel good about ourselves. But some of the most enduring characters are the scoundrels, and worse.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
For generations, the Sunset was the center of entertainment and community life, bringing the world to Asheboro. But though the Sunset faded, it never lost its place in the life of the city. In 1981, the old theater closed as a movie house, but reopened as a live music venue, the Grand Ole Opry. Country stars from Nashville, straight from the legendary Ryman Theater, as well as local talent, picked and sang and kept alive the tradition of the Sunset as a place where Asheboro met to find entertainment. The building has been in constant use throughout the years, never abandoned, never allowed to fall into neglect. What had once seemed destined to fade has found an exciting new life as the center of a vibrant and growing downtown Asheboro. For 80 years, the Sunset Theater has been the gathering place of the city, and tonight this grand lady of Asheboro's downtown is ready for her close-up. It's time for Premiere at the Sunset.